All right. Welcome to the Rise Up podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Mitchell, and thank you so much for spending some time with me today. On this show, I do my best to help simplify everything that goes into the weight loss process so that you can get out of your own way, make this a lot easier to fit into your life, not have your life revolve around it, and not only get results that we love, but are also long lasting and easily to sustain because we get out of our own way, we give ourselves context, and we just get out of our heads. And if you're a long time listener, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me. If this is first time ever listening, I hope you learned something. My entire goal is to help shift your perspective so that you can realize that this process does not have to be as difficult, and that sometimes we're the problem. A lot of times we're the problem, and it's not because we're doing it on purpose. It's because we lack awareness, we lack understanding, and that's what I want to do for you on this episode and every other episode before. If you like my stuff, I have more resources listed in the show notes. So, go find those when it comes to videos and other free resources available. Go check those out. And if you learn something new, please do me a favor and just share this with at least one person. My entire goal is to just help you wherever you're at. And if I can make even a small impact, I know I did my job. So, and if you feel like sharing it and tagging me, I would greatly appreciate that too. I love connecting with you. All right. So, without further ado, let's kick off this long not long awaited long in between times of a Q&A episode. I actually asked a question in the Transformation Project Facebook group. And I was just, wanted to do a bit of a Q&A episode, see if I could answer anyone's questions that they had rattling around in their brain. I had a couple. So only two questions on this episode, so maybe my rambling will not be too long today. But there are some very awesome questions, and I'm very, very excited to dive into them. So I'm sure you probably got the gist from the title of this episode and I'll just kick things off with that first one of if I lost if I lost all of my physical results tomorrow, they were just gone, right? And still knowing what I know now, how would I rebuild? This is a fantastic question because I made a video about this not too long ago. But if I had to start all over, but I still had the same information that I have in my brain now, well, first and foremost, I would allow myself to freak the fuck out. Mainly because that would be wild. That'd be crazy. And something I love helping my clients understand is that, hey, your feelings are valid. Let them have their time in the sun, right? Because I would probably wake up incredibly disappointed. I've been working, on my physical health for God knows how long, well over a decade, I think. Well, okay, I've been active for like since I was 8 years old, so 20 years, right? And I've been physically focused, or I've been mentally and specifically focused on like longevity for the last for three years, right? Because the time before the last 3 years was primarily around football and just only caring and utilizing my body in a way that I could play football better, right? There were aesthetic goals, but I didn't understand anything about nutrition. But anyway, I worked really hard to take what I had built from sports and actually make it conducive to my life, right? So I'd be pretty disappointed and I just allow myself to be like, okay, that sucks. I can't really change much, right? Because I would start remembering that, okay, it's in the past. What is done is done. The only thing I can do is look ahead, right? So after the initial disappointment and giving myself the understanding, I would first and foremost just start understanding where I'm currently at. So this is where I would utilize tools of like, what's my body composition look like? What does my daily activity look like? What's my overall calorie intake look like? And even I would simplify that even further. I would just focus on what's my step count look like? How often am I training? And what does my nutrient density look like? So instead of tracking calories, I was like, how many meals have protein? How many meals have color in them? And how often am I getting complex carbohydrates, just carbs coming from the ground? And how many fruits am I getting on a daily basis, right? So I have a foundation that I get everyone started on before they even focus on numbers or calories. I start working my way to incorporating protein, color in each meal, right? That's at least I eat I will eat at least 3 meals a day. So a protein serving and a color, some sort of veggie or fruit at every meal, right? I would try to have some sort of complex carb. This be oats, rice, beans, quinoa, couscous, whatever it is. I have those at each meal. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner, protein, complex carb, and color. That would be my main goal. Working my way up to just building consistency on that front, right? When it comes to the food side, when it comes to my nutrition, and this wouldn't be just like, boom, right now I do everything all at once, right? That would be where my roadmap is going. But first is understanding how many of those, how many meals have those things in them. If none of my meals have them in, if none of my meals have protein, I'm gonna work on adding one protein at a time until I feel confident and consistent that I will be able to do it the second meal, the third meal, right? And then when I have a better structure where all three of my meals have a breakfast, have a protein, have a color, and a complex carbohydrate, right? And I'm understanding the wiggle room that I want to have because, I'm still probably going to be married to my wife and I still want a weekly crumble cookie and a weekly date night. So I'll find out, or I'll figure out what my ratios are with my consistency with my overall meals first, then learn how to incorporate life factors that don't derail me from the number one thing that's super important to see results, which is consistency. And if we're constantly eating crumble cookies, constantly snacking, and constantly over consuming foods that we don't intend to because we don't know our structure, right? That makes it harder to be consistent. So first and foremost, before I worry about the results, before I worry about the numbers, I want to establish a lifestyle that I'm happy with, especially when it comes to my food, right? 80% consistency is all that is needed. And that's what I'm going to keep reminding myself if I had to start over tomorrow, right? And then when it comes to my activity, right, like I said, I would analyze. I want to get somewhere between 6 to 10,000 steps on a regular basis, right? And the idea is just to have that wide of a range so the overall average leans high on the higher end more often, right? Because I want to average somewhere about 8,000 steps because that's pretty manageable for me, living, working from home, kind of somewhat of a sedentary job because I no longer work in gyms. But I would find way. I luckily have a dog, right? So I have I have to go on 2 walks with her. If I don't, that's everyone's annoyed because she still has so much energy, right? But I would just first understand how many steps I'm currently getting, and if I'm close to that 6 to 10,000 range and averaging about 8,000 on a daily basis. If I'm not, I would work on finding more activity where I can throughout the day, be it parking farther away, going to the restroom in a different part of my apartment, or by the time this episode airs, I will be moved into our new house. I fucking hate moving, but that's a hack I like to use, is help people, remind them that you can get extra movement by just use a different restroom on a different floor of your house. It's not like crazy, but if you do that multiple times throughout the day, it adds up, right? So just being intentional with finding more movement, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be pretty. Where am I at now? And where am I trying to get to? And once I am consistent and getting to that level, that's where I know I'm in a good place. I'm still not worried about numbers yet. I'm still not worried about getting back to my goals. I'm just establishing the lifestyle that's going to be conducive to me getting the goals, and more importantly, sustaining the goals the way that I have been before I lost them all, right? So after I analyze where I'm at and work to that 6 to 10,000 range, trying to average about 8,000 steps, finding time for movement the best way I can, because perfection is not the goal here, right? Consistency most of the time, not all the time, right? So after I have those two things in place, then I'm going to look at my training schedule or what my training routine. What are my goals, right? My goals revolve around strength and a certain amount of muscle definition, right? So, I sit roughly, I have no idea. I have no idea what my body fat percentage, I haven't tracked it since God knows how long. So if I had to guess, and this is a wild speculation, somewhere around 15% body fat, maybe. I don't actually know, right? But that's where I like. I like to call it lifestyle lean, where I'm not miserable eating like just very plain Jane meals all the time. I get to have the wiggle room of enjoying my food. I get to enjoy the strength and performance of my body, and I don't follow a super strict meticulous diet, right? So I would have to involve the strength training that I'm doing, or I would want to prioritize strength training to send a loud signal to my body that muscle and strength is important to me. And that would be, I'd work to I would work to establish a routine of working out no less than twice a week, but ideally 3 to 5 times a week, right? That's something that I would do because that's something I do not only for the physical results, because part of that routine, prioritizing movement helps me. It helps my mental clarity, it helps my focus, it helps get me away from my desk. I would give myself so many reasons why prioritizing exercise are important to me, and how it's going to help me outside of the gym, right? It's not only if we only do exercise for one reason, to look better, to lose weight, when life gets hard, it's going to be very easy to say, well, I don't really like what I'm doing, because all I'm doing it for is to look better. And when life is hard, that superficial, very shallow reason to do something isn't very convincing, when it's much easier to stay at home and do nothing else, right? So I would essentially remind myself of what I'm trying to accomplish, the physical side, what I gain when I do those things consistently, and just continue to remind myself of where I'm going, right? I should have said this very, very clearly. I should have said this earlier, but I think it was implied. If I lost the current results that I have now, my goal would just be English is hard, would just be to get back to there, right? My clarity on what I'm trying to accomplish is get back to where I'm currently at, because I'm happy with where I'm at, right? I don't get what I'm don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying like, oh, look at me, I get to live this life. No, I worked hard to get here, to be comfortable in my own skin, to look in the mirror and like what I see, right? Because for basically the vast majority of my life, I've always felt insignificant. I've always felt like it was never good enough, and I've always felt like, I looked like shit. And I have just recently, like I probably around the start of this year, have been truly able to accept my body, without that weird relationship of it's not good enough. I don't deserve to be confident in my own skin. Like this very easy, like I don't want to say I'm diagnosed with body dysmorphia, but I do have similar behaviors, and it sucks, to work hard for so long and to just tear yourself down. It does not bode well for longevity, right? So as I'm reminding myself, I want to just get back to here, right? That's the biggest thing. And when I'm working on establishing the routine that's going to get me my physical results, but more importantly, give me everything I want out of my life, the energy, the focus, the clarity, right? The performance, right? The freedom of, I don't really walk around with a lot of pain and discomfort, right? Those are what I will gain as I'm working to establish a routine, right? Everything about that is focused on what I'm going to gain instead of what I'm going to lose, right? That's very, very important here, because if we're always focusing on just losing body fat, losing weight, right? We put a very negative connotation on our process, right? But if we can shift our perspective, shift our mindset around this, and what will I gain by doing these things, even if I'm not in a place where I'm happy with, right? I will gain so much more than just a better body, right? I will gain so much energy. I will gain so much more mental clarity. I will gain the lifestyle that I want, to be able to do anything I want with my body without restrictions, right? And look good, or look good by my standards, because that's the most important thing. I get to define what's good to me, right? And if I'm not happy, or if I want to see improvements, I have the power to do that, right? But it's not going to be out of guilt or shame or frustration. It's going to be, this is an area I like to improve on, and I'm going to work on it, right? That's as I'm working on the mechanical stuff, the portions with my food, the routine with my daily activity and my workout routine, right? I am constantly reminding myself, talking to myself, because the crazy people are the ones who don't talk to themselves, where this is all headed. Because the mechanical side, the mechanical pieces of the nutrition, of the exercise, is easy. The conversations we have ourselves, the thoughts, make it harder than it needs to be, because a lot of times it's very negative, it's very down. It's very focused around tearing ourselves down instead of building ourselves back up, right? So as I'm working on those things, I'm constantly working on the mental battle that most people go on, that most people struggle with, right? So on that front, after I have my food portions in a place that I'm happy with, I have my daily routine or my daily activity in a place I'm happy with, I have my workout routine in a place where I'm happy with, I'm drinking somewhere between half a gallon to a gallon of water, right? I have my big old gallon jug with me, because it's easy for me to just fill this thing up once, because I hate filling up my water bottle multiple times a day. And speaking of, I need to take a drink. So I try to drink about half of that, but most of the time I drink the whole gallon, because I know how much better I feel when I do that. And then I'm also going to focus on just getting as much quality sleep as I can. Ideally between 7 to 8 hours, but 6 to 8 is pretty good for me. And I would just make sure that those areas of recovery were helping or were taken care of as well, right? But I'm not doing all this at once. I would do it one step at a time. I would start with the one I'm most confident in, and probably not probably, definitely the one I'm always been most confident in is the movement side. So I'd start there. I'd build momentum. I'd build belief that, hey, even though I lost everything, I'm going to start with the things I'm good at and build a lot of momentum, and then fill in the gaps from there. Once I'm confident with my movement, my daily activity, then I'll focus on the next area, right? I'll start working on getting my protein servings up. I focus on getting my color servings up. I focus on my water, right? One layer at a time, because I would understand that as long as I'm making even the smallest amount of progress is fucking progress. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how big or how small, because the big transformations are not done overnight. They're done from the constant small choices that are made throughout the process, right? And Rome wasn't built in a day. So when I'm starting over, this is how I would give myself so much new perspective and remind myself constantly of where I'm going, and understand the routine that I had that gave me the results that I have now, and work back to that consistently, right? This is before we even get into intensity of training, all that stuff, because that doesn't really matter until you have consistency established in everything that's needed to see physical changes, right? And then you can focus on those details of putting the stress on your body needed to see the results that you want, right? And that's for a completely different episode. But if I had to start over, that's how I would do it. And I would do it with the understanding and the consistent reminders of the mental side, right? Because most people need that more than anything else. Right. I just got off the phone with a woman this morning who had lost 20 pounds in like 2 or 3 months, but in her head, she doesn't see any changes, right? But I had to ask her what else has changed, right? Other people are noticing her body change, right? She feels better, and she likes the way she's feeling, but every time her brain tells her that she's not seeing any changes, and that's okay. That's what most people struggle with, right? And that's the hardest part. That's what makes it hard to not only get to our goals but sustain them, because we have this negative perspective so much that we don't like doing it. It makes it so hard to keep going in the long run. So that's where I would focus on the things I'm good at. I would remind myself that I'm not happy with where I'm at. I don't know what happened, but it happened. All I can do is move forward and work my best to get back to where I want to be, and start small. That's it. That is, I mean, and then from there, that's how I would build my foundation. And then from there, once all those things I talked about with my daily activity, my workouts, my food and meal portions, my lifestyle of the creating wiggle room, and my hydration, we're all in a great place. Then I'd worry about calories, protein amounts, and I would aim for about 150 to 200 grams of protein. I would aim for, let's say I gained a bunch of body fat and lost most of my muscle mass, I would focus more on a surplus / maintenance. So yeah, probably about 160 to 200 grams of protein on a daily basis. I'd aim for about 28 to 3,200 calories, and just go through a body recomp and focus on muscle building for a time being before I would go on a cut. And I wish I could give you timelines, but depending on how my body changes, that's how I would go about it and stay consistent with my routine, because I built in the wiggle room to live my life and see the results. And I would just keep doing it until I got back to a place where where I'm at now, right? And I say that because it's not a magic pill, right? There's no like secret of like, no, you just start with the basics, you build consistency, you build belief, you get out of your own head, and you keep doing it. And once you're there, right, then we talk about like how to reintroduce calories, how to cut calories, how to maintain, right? Like all that is important, but we have to establish the things that are going to get there, because how we lose the weight, improve body composition, how we keep it off. And if we do it in ways that don't actually fit with the way that we want to live our life, well, it makes it hard to maintain in the long run, right? So I hope that gives you some perspective, because if you're a client, like either a current client or an old client, you'll probably recognize some of those things, because I would do the exact same thing, right? I had to figure all that out the hard way. I didn't do it any of that way. I just kind of threw a bunch of shit at a wall and hope it stuck. Eventually it did, but it took a long time. And now I would I would do it a little bit more focused with more context, more understanding, right? So yeah, that was a fun question. I hope that made sense. And it's very simple. Very, very simple. Like the technical stuff is important after you have the routine and you've proven that you can be consistent. And once you consistently show up, then the technical stuff just amplifies the results, and it doesn't feel as difficult because you're actually just living your life and not changing everything to see a number on the scale or a body composition, right? But when you have that routine, you have that consistency, you have that belief, then when you make the shift to being strategic with calories and all those things, right? Again, it's a protocol. It doesn't last forever. You do it until you see a result that you're happy with, and then you make adjustments to understand how to stay or how to maintain your results. And again, you just understand what your body needs to see those things. How can you take care of it with like the digestion, the sleep, the hydration, right? Eating enough protein, sending a stimulus, a consistent signal over time, right? Staying consistent with all those things. And consistent does not mean perfect. I want to remind you of that, because I damn sure would not be 100% perfect. I am not 100% perfect right now. After this podcast, I'm going to go work out and I'm going to eat a Snickers bar, and I'll be very happy about it. So yeah, that's how I would start over. That's how I would rebuild, you know. God forbid that does happen, but if it does, I'm ready. And life will always happen. But again, if you're thinking about, if you're in your own process, I want you to remind yourself of how do you want to live your life, and if the way you're going to see the results that you want isn't truly making you, or is more focused about everything you're going to lose and everything instead of everything that you're going to gain, I don't want you to abandon it, but I want you to give yourself more context, more perspective, and make it a little bit more easy to keep showing up and focusing and having that shift of being accommodating and not being able to accommodate instead of being perfect. It's basically a cheat code that guarantees results in the long run. So thank you, Nick, for that question. That was awesome. So my next question, right? I thought this wasn't going to be too long with my rambling, but I think this is about 15 minutes already. So we'll see how the second question goes. This one comes from one of my current clients. So when you feel like your day/week was on point and scale and body comp doesn't match expectations, what do you say to yourself to keep focus? Oh boy. So I want to read that question one more time. When you feel like your day/week was on point and a scale/body composition doesn't match expectations, what do you say to yourself to keep focus? All right. So the key word here is expectations. The main reason we do not see the results that we want or we think we should get is because we have some unrealistic expectations. And let me give you some perspective. If you expected your child, right? If you're a parent, right? Or if you plan on being a parent, if you don't have kids, it's fine. Like just think of yourself as a child, right? If you expect your 1-year-old, or I guess 6-7-month-year-old, to be running when they're just learning how to stand up and crawl, right? Are they failures? Do they lack focus? No, that's an unrealistic expectation. Right? You cannot sprint if you do not have the ability to walk, right? So when we're understanding expectations with seeing physical results, the expectation that you have that like, okay, this is a transactional relationship that most people have. It's like, I did this, I put this in, therefore I should get it out, right? But when we have transactional relationships with people, it's like, oh, I did the dishes, I expect my wife Hannah to do the laundry, and I expect her to cook, right? like that's not fair to just expect that from her because I did that one thing, right? That's a little bit extreme, but I want to give you this. This is pretty much what's going on in our head when we have these expectations, especially unmet expectations. So when we're in those moments when we think we should expect to see something and we don't, right? We need to question the expectation. Do we actually know how or what it takes to see the results that we want? Do we? If we don't, right? A good test is like, have you been able to live in a lifestyle where you're able to sustain and be happy with your body for a time that was also in a way that aligned with the way you want to live, right? For example, if you're able to lose weight on keto, right, but the second you would hop off keto, you would regain all the weight. Were you technically happy? Did you solve the problem, right? You could have been happy to have the weight off, but were you living the life that you wanted to live? Did you plan on not touching carbs for the rest of your life? Again, if you did, that's a great expectation. You should be doing keto. But if you don't expect to do that, right, keto probably isn't great for you and it's going to really mess with your expectations. So understanding your expectations is more important, and just evaluate, is this transactional relationship with my body a realistic expectation? Because unfortunately, I'm gonna tell you the truth here, and I'm glad that this is one of my clients who asked this question, because he's in the middle of a dieting phase. We're intentionally lowering calories to see body composition improvements, right? Our body, just because we do this, our body doesn't change the way that we think it should, right? It's not a transactional relationship. It will not change just because you change one thing one week or you change the focus one week, right? It will take time, right? Our body is not always, our body isn't at its back, is not at our beck and call. And it's not because it's trying to fight against you. It's because it's doing the one thing needed that you don't have to fucking worry about. It's keeping you alive. It's keeping important organs functioning without you having to constantly think about it, right? You don't think about your heart pumping. You don't think about digesting and absorbing your food. You don't think about detoxifying your body like your liver does, right? All of that just happens. And our body is doing a lot of that. It's doing all of that, right? While also interpreting everything that we're telling it on the outside, right? So when we're understanding our activity level, our calorie intake, right, it's trying to evaluate what the stimulus on the outside is so it can allocate resources or let go of resources to accommodate to those stressors, right? It doesn't. So when it's complicated, right? It's a very complicated process, but it doesn't always respond just because we expect it to, right? And we have to understand that transactional relationship is not fair to our body, because our body's doing a lot of things that we don't ask it to do. It just does it. And we should be grateful for that, because you don't have to think about pumping blood throughout your body, right? Your body's taking care of you, right? And it will change eventually as long as you continue the stimulus of restricting calories appropriately. I don't mean restriction like you can't touch anything, right? But getting into a calorie window that is technically less calories eaten than you burn, right? So limit calories, I should say, instead of restrict calories, right? And as that signal stays consistent, right, that's how you keep focus, is remind yourself what your body's actually doing for you, right? And say, well, even though it's not changing the way that I thought it should, I know that I feel great, that I've seen physical improvement so far, if you have, right? This is me kind of getting specific to that client, because we have seen physical improvements and felt improvements, which is a very, very important thing of understanding. Like, when you feel good or you feel better than where you started, changes are happening, right? Just because the numbers or the body composition didn't improve the way you thought it should, right? If you still feel better than when you were, right, or you're noticing improvements, changes are happening. And that's how you keep focus. It's like, okay, I may not be where I want to be now, even though I had a solid week, a solid day, right? It doesn't automatically mean that it's not like it doesn't automatically mean that we get our immediate return on our investment, right? If you invest in like a what's that one thing? It's like investing in stocks, but it's just like it's not a Roth IRA. It's like an S&P, I think. I can't remember. I don't know much about investing. I just know if you have like an investment bank account, right, and you invest over like 30 years, people talk about how much money you can make, right? But in the beginning, you don't make any money, because compound interest hasn't had time to process, hasn't had the consistent influx of the stimulus of your money to compound and then start generating those big rewards of compound interest investing, right? And I'm very new to understanding compound interest, but investing in general, but it's the same concept, right? Just because you put money in doesn't mean you get rich right now, right? Just because you were in a deficit for 1 day or 1 week doesn't mean you automatically get the results. Sometimes that can definitely happen, right? If we're talking about someone who's, 300 pounds to like 150 pounds, someone who's 300 pounds, their body, again, there's no shame here. There's nothing along those lines, but our body wants to be healthy, right? And if we are at that kind of weight, right? So a lot of the time weight loss seems a lot quicker because there's a lot more fuel to be used more efficient, more effectively, right? But if you're 150 pounds, there's not as much fuel. So like if that 300-pound person sees like 30 pounds lost in just 3 months, right? That's relatively normal because of their body size in general, right? But as they get smaller, those jumps will get smaller and smaller because there'll be less and less fuel, right? So again, it's just understanding and giving yourself the perspective, right? The reminder of your focus is what are my expectations, and are they realistic? Do I actually understand the relationship that I have with my body? Do I actually give thanks to my body for all the things that it does for me? And just because it's not changing doesn't mean it's fighting against me. It's just got a lot going on. So then I can evaluate if I feel better, if I feel consistent energy improvements, I'm taking care of my body and making its job of keeping me alive easier, right? If I feel run down, if I feel miserable, if I'm constantly dehydrated, right? If my digestion sucks, I'm not taking care of my body. I'm making my body's job harder, right? So that's another way of just shifting your perspective and staying focused is, am I doing all the things to help my body so that as it does change, like it will make it easier for my body to change, right? And when you do that, I've said this a lot, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. We can remind ourselves how much our body is actually doing, and we can look at what we're doing to see the physical improvements, and we feel better. We're still feeling good with what we're doing. Eventually, our body will change. We just have to keep doing the thing, right? Like I said earlier, with my question, like eventually the mechanical side, the food, all it becomes is just doing it on repeat, doing it consistently. Because how we lose the weight, how we improve body composition is how we keep the results. So if we're doing it in a way that actually aligns with us and we feel good about it, right? This is where it just happens. You guarantee it will happen. Instead of getting discouraged, slowing down, and feeling bad, right? Now we're guaranteeing that we won't see the results, or at the very least, it'll take a lot longer to get there. So this is a lot more than I anticipated to share with this question, but you know me, I gotta go down the rabbit hole. A lot of it is understanding your expectations, the conversation that you're having with yourself, and giving yourself the actual perspective, right? The perspective of where you're currently at. Are you feeling improvements? If you are, you're on a great place. Your body will change eventually. You just have to keep doing it, right? And you have to check your expectations at the door and say, you know what? A transactional relationship is not fair to my body. My body's doing a lot for me without me even asking to, right? None of us were asked to be born. We just were. And now our body does the number one thing it's meant to do is keep us alive, keep us functioning, and do its best to keep us healthy, right? And when we take care of our body and shift that expectation, like I'm taking care of my body while taking care of myself, right? That's how you keep focused. That's how you check your expectations at the door and remind yourself that I'm on the right path. And that is the hardest thing to do. Not the workouts, not the diet, right? We think those are the hard things, but it's our relationships, it's our unrealistic expectations that are the ones unknowingly self-sabotaging our progress, making it harder to get to our goals. So yes, I hope that made sense. I hope that answered your question, and I hope that gave you a new perspective, right? And this is fun. I really, really like answering questions. So it's like my favorite form of presentations is answering questions, because it's like so much more. There's so much context. There's so many rabbit holes that you could dive into. So yeah, it's so much fun. So anyway, that is the only questions I had for this episode. I'm hoping to get more next time, but these were fun. And obviously, I could keep talking, and I don't want these to be hour long. Maybe sometimes they'll be valid enough to be an hour long, but not right now. Not right now. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on. And I hope you learned something. So thank you so much again for spending time with me. If you learned something today, if I helped shift your perspective, I'd really greatly appreciate it. I'd really greatly appreciate it if you is that redundant to say? Really greatly appreciate. If you shared the episode, shared the show with at least one person so that I could hopefully help them wherever they're at. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one.